The feeling will leave. It will always leave. Stop waiting for it to show up. It is an unreliable, fair-weather friend. It will abandon a person at the first sign of a storm. A life built on the foundation of a feeling is a house built on shifting sand. A system must be built instead. Friction must be removed from the right path, and a person must show up every single day, even when, and especially when, they want to quit. Now, small daily wins will always beat dramatic, heroic starts. One tiny, consistent, boring habit is what gives a person real, unstoppable momentum. Consistent, steady motion will always beat rare bursts of intensity. Every single time, without excuses or apologies, keep doing the small, boring, powerful work. It is the only thing that builds a real future. It is the only thing that creates real change.
A person will fail. It is a guarantee. The mission is not to avoid the failure. It is to reset immediately and to keep going. One bad day does not cancel a month of progress. It only teaches a lesson on how to come back stronger. Today, the speed of the recovery after a failure is the true measure of a warrior's discipline, not the absence of the failure itself. Get up, reset, go again, now. Quit pretending that this consistency is heroic. It is not. Consistency is boring, brutal, unsexy work, done on a daily, relentless basis. It is messy, it is imperfect, it is full of flaws. But the people who are willing to stick with it, the ones who can endure the soul-crushing boredom of the grind, they will always outlast the loud, flashy starters, and they will be the ones who win in the end. Fall in love with the boring, not the heroic.
Set fewer goals, make fewer rules, and make the act of showing up completely unavoidable. A life must be designed so that the right choice is the easiest, most frictionless choice every single day. This is not about willpower. It is about strategic design. It is about being the ruthless architect of an environment that makes discipline the default setting and makes quitting a logistical nightmare. Win the war in the design phase. A tracker must be used instead of a feeling. A calendar with a big red X for every day the work is done. A journal with a single line of progress. This is not about shame, this is about data. A streak must be watched as it grows. And when a day is missed and a streak is broken, another one must be started immediately without drama. Progress needs cold, hard, undeniable records, not warm, fuzzy, convenient excuses. Every single day.
Do not try to overhaul a life overnight. That is a recipe for catastrophic failure. One tiny, almost pathetic change must be picked. A change so small it is almost impossible to fail at. One push-up, one page, 1 minute of meditation. And that tiny habit must be defended like a job, with a life or death intensity, until it becomes automatic, normal, boring. And then another tiny habit is added. This is how a fortress is built, one small, unbreakable brick at a time. The why must be deeper than vanity or quick, cheap rewards. When things get ugly, and they will get ugly, when the pain is unbearable and the progress is invisible, the real purpose is the only fuel that will keep a person working. The why must be forged in the fires of something real, a duty, a promise, a legacy, a mission. A shallow why will be incinerated at the first sign of real heat. A deep why is the only thing that is fireproof.
The friction must be ruthlessly removed from the path of action. The gym clothes are laid out the night before. The book is placed on the pillow in the morning. The healthy meal is prepped on Sunday for the week. The action must be made as automatic as possible. The fewer decisions that are required in the moment of weakness, the more likely the action will actually be done. Daily. A person is at their weakest when they are tired and stressed. The system must be designed for the weakest self to succeed. Stop romanticizing the idea of epic, heroic starts. A life does not need heroics. It does not need perfection. It needs a simple, repeatable, boring habit. A habit that can be done when a person is tired, when they are distracted, when they are discouraged, when they are flying at 30,000 feet and it is late at night. The habit must be indestructible. It must be able to survive the chaos of a real, messy life. Always. The search is not for the perfect habit. It is for the unbreakable one.
A person must be willing to suck at the beginning. They must accept the sloppy, ugly, imperfect starts and the clumsy, amateur, embarrassing effort. Consistency is a machine that tolerates a lot of mess, and it still produces massive, undeniable results, way past the flashy, beautiful, but empty intensity of the starter. Keep grinding. The mastery is not in the flawless first attempt. It is in the relentless willingness to be a fool until the skill is finally forged. Progress must be made visible. It must be tangible. Days must be crossed off on a calendar. One photo of the change must be taken every week. One line about the work must be written in a journal. These small, simple, visible records are powerful weapons. They punish laziness and they reward the person who shows up daily. They are the external, physical proof of the internal, invisible war. And they are the only evidence that matters when the feelings of doubt start to creep in.
If the reliance is on a feeling, a person will fail. When that feeling inevitably disappears, systems must be created instead of temporary pep talks, so a person acts even when their willpower is completely gone. The system is the safety net for the soul. It is the protocol that is followed when the mind is in chaos. The system does not care about feelings. The system only cares about execution. Trust the system works. Progress will always beat perfection. Motion must be picked over the paralysis of waiting. Small, boring, consistent habits must be added. And the brutal, beautiful truth must be accepted that boring, repeated daily effort wins more championships than rare, flashy brilliance every single damn time. The world belongs to the grinders, not the geniuses. It belongs to the finishers, not the starters. A person will not feel like it most days. That is a guarantee. The routine that has been set must be the thing that is relied on, not the fleeting, treacherous, unreliable feelings. Discipline is not a momentary act of heroism. It is a habit, layered over another habit, done with a brutal, boring consistency. Do it anyway. That is the entire mantra of the professional. Do it anyway. When a streak of consistency ends, it is not the end of the world. The break must be fixed. The streak must be restarted. And the small wins must continue to be stacked. Without drama, without shame, without self-flagellation. The all-or-nothing mindset is a trap of the amateur. It is the lie that says one mistake erases all the progress. It does not. The only thing that erases the progress is the failure to start again, immediately, right now, today. An environment must be designed to make the good choices the default. Talent is not the limiter for most people. Friction is the limiter. The small daily obstacles that make the right choice harder and the wrong choice easier. These obstacles must be ruthlessly removed, and the discipline will rise naturally to fill the space. Every single damn day. A person's environment is a powerful, invisible hand. It is either pushing them forward or it is pulling them back. They must become the conscious architect of that hand. A goal without a clear tactical plan is a wish. It is a ghost that has no power in the real world. One tiny concrete action must be picked, and it must be done daily until it becomes normal and boring and therefore completely unstoppable. No excuses. The smaller the first action, the more powerful it is, because it is the one thing that can break the spell of inertia and start the chain reaction of momentum. Accountability is not about shame. It is about truth. The slips must be owned, the wins must be logged, and there must be a refusal to negotiate the standards with the tired, weak, comfortable voice in the head. Daily. That voice is a brilliant, seductive, and deadly negotiator. It knows all the weaknesses. It knows all the angles. There can be no negotiation. There can only be the cold, hard, brutal execution of the standard that has already been set. Stop waiting for a perfect, optimal setup. A start must be made with what is available right now. The smallest, most pathetic version of the habit must be created, and it must be repeated until it is unquestionable. Always. The person with a terrible plan who starts today will always beat the person with a perfect plan who starts next week. Action is the only thing that creates clarity, and motion is the only thing that creates momentum. The time for planning is over. The time for action is now.
The feeling of not wanting to is the signal. It is the starting gun for the real work. The work of forging a will that is stronger than a mood. The work of building an identity that is based on commitment, not comfort. That feeling is the resistance that builds the muscle. The warrior does not run from that feeling, they run towards it, because they know that is where the growth is. That is where the victory is. This is a game of inches, not of miles. The focus must be on winning the next inch, the next rep, the next page, the next moment. That is the only thing that can be controlled. The grand, glorious future is built in the small, dirty, ugly trenches of the present. Fall in love with the inches, and the miles will take care of themselves.
The system is the only thing that is real. The motivation is a ghost. The willpower is a myth. The feelings are a storm that will pass. The only thing that remains is the system. The daily, non-negotiable, boring, powerful protocol that has been designed to produce results, regardless of the internal or external weather. Build the system, trust the system, execute the system, and the system will build the future that is wanted. The streaks are a visual representation of a promise kept to the self. That is why they are so powerful. Every X on the calendar is a piece of evidence that a person can be trusted by themselves. And self-trust is the bedrock of all confidence and all great achievement. Protect the streak. And when it breaks, as it inevitably will, start a new one, instantly. The victory is not in the unbroken streak. It is in the relentless willingness to begin again.
The environment is more powerful than the intention. A good intention in a bad environment will always fail. A weak intention in a good environment can succeed. The work is not about summoning more willpower. It is about creating an environment where less willpower is needed, where the path of discipline is the path of least resistance. This is the ultimate secret of the high performer. They are not masters of willpower. They are masters of environmental design. The smallest version of the habit is the sharpest point of the spear. It is the thing that can penetrate the armor of procrastination. When a person feels overwhelmed and unable to start, the question is not, how can I do the whole thing? The question is, what is the smallest possible version of this I can do right now? 2 minutes, 1 sentence, 1 step. That is the only thing that is asked. That is the only thing that is required to break the spell of inaction and to begin. Master the art of the small start, and no goal will ever be too big again.
The truth of the numbers will set a person free. Free from their own stories, their own illusions, their own excuses. The tracker is the mirror that does not lie. It reflects back exactly what has been done and what has not been done. It is a tool of radical honesty. And radical honesty is the only foundation for real growth. Stop guessing. Stop hoping. Start tracking. And let the brutal, beautiful truth of the data be the guide. This is not about being a robot. This is about being a professional. A professional who understands that consistency is the only thing that matters. A professional who has built a system to ensure that consistency. A professional who does not let their feelings dictate their actions. A professional who shows up, does the work, and gets the results. The amateur is a slave to their moods. The professional is the master of their systems. The choice of which to be is made every single day in the small, boring, powerful habits that are chosen or that are ignored. The time for being an amateur is over. The time for being a professional is now. Go do the work.